The Law of Success. Lesson 6. Imagination. Imagination is the workshop of the human mind wherein old ideas and established facts may be reassembled into new combinations and put to new uses. The modern dictionary defines imagination as follows: the act of constructive intellect in grouping the materials of knowledge or thought into new, original, and rational systems, the constructive or creative faculty, embracing poetic, artistic, philosophic, scientific, and ethical imagination. The picturing power of the mind, the formation of mental images, pictures, or mental representation of objects or ideas, particularly of objects of sense perception and of mathematical reasoning. Also the reproduction and combination, usually with more or less irrational or abnormal modification, of the images or ideas of memory or recalled facts of experience. Imagination has been called the creative power of the soul. But this is somewhat abstract and goes more deeply into the meaning than is necessary from the viewpoint of a student of this course who wishes to use the course only as a means of attaining material or monetary advantages in life. If you have mastered and thoroughly understood the preceding lessons of this reading course, you know that the materials out of which you built your definite chief aim were assembled and combined in your imagination. You also know that self-confidence and initiative and leadership must be created in your imagination before they can become a reality. For it is in the workshop of your imagination that you will put the principle of autosuggestion into operation in creating these necessary qualities. This lesson on imagination might be called the hub of this reading course, because every lesson of the course leads to this lesson and makes use of the principle upon which it is based, just as all the telephone wires lead to the exchange office for their source of power. You will never have a definite purpose in life. You will never have self-confidence. You will never have initiative and leadership unless you first create these qualities in your imagination and see yourself in possession of them. Just as the oak tree develops from the germ that lies in the acorn, and the bird develops from the germ that lies asleep in the egg, so will your material achievements grow out of the organized plans that you create in your imagination. First comes the thought, then organization of that thought into ideas and plans, then transformation of those plans into reality. The beginning, as you will observe, is in your imagination. The imagination is both interpretative and creative in nature. It can examine facts, concepts, and ideas, and it can create new combinations and plans out of these. Through its interpretative capacity, the imagination has one power not generally attributed to it, namely, the power to register vibrations and thought waves that are put into motion from outside sources. Just as the radio receiving apparatus picks up the vibrations of sound. The principle through which this interpretative capacity of the imagination functions is called telepathy, the communication of thought from one mind to another, at long or short distances, without the aid of physical or mechanical appliances. In the manner explained in the introductory lesson of this course, telepathy is an important factor to a student who is preparing to make effective use of imagination, for the reason that this telepathic capacity of the imagination is constantly picking up thought waves and vibrations of every description. So-called snap judgment and hunches, which prompt one to form an opinion or decide upon a course of action that is not in harmony with logic and reason, are usually the result of stray thought waves that have registered in the imagination. The recently developed radio apparatus has enabled us to understand that the elements of the ether are so sensitive and alive that all manner of sound waves are constantly flying here and there with lightning-like speed. You have only to understand the modern radio outfit to understand, also, the principle of telepathy. So well has this principle been established, through psychological research, that we have abundance of proof that two minds which are properly attuned and in harmony with each other may send and receive thought at long distances without the aid of mechanical apparatus of any sort. Rarely have two minds become so well attuned that unbroken chains of thought could be registered in this manner, but there is evidence sufficient to establish the fact that parts of organized thought have been picked up. That you may understand how closely interwoven are the 15 factors upon which this reading course is based, consider, for example, what happens when a salesman who lacks confidence in himself and in his goods walks in to see a prospective buyer. Whether the prospective buyer is conscious of it or not, his imagination immediately senses that lack of confidence in the salesman's mind. The salesman's own thoughts are actually undermining his efforts. This will explain, from another angle, why self-confidence is one of the most important factors entering into the great struggle for success. The principle of telepathy and the law of attraction, through which like attracts like, explain many a failure. If the mind has a tendency to attract from the ether those thought vibrations which harmonize with the dominating thoughts of a given mind, you can easily understand why a negative mind that dwells upon failure and lacks the vitalizing force of self-confidence would not attract a positive mind that is dominated by thoughts of success. Perhaps these explanations are somewhat abstract to the student who has not made any particular study of the functioning processes of the mind, but it seems necessary to inject them into this lesson as a means of enabling the student to understand and make practical use of the subject of this lesson. The imagination is too often regarded merely as an indefinite, untraceable, indescribable something that does nothing but create fiction. It is this popular disregard of the powers of the imagination that has made necessary these more or less abstract references to one of the most important subjects of this course. Not only is the subject of imagination an important factor in this course, but it is one of the most interesting subjects, as you will observe when you begin to see how it affects all that you do toward the achievement of your definite chief aim. You will see how important is the subject of imagination when you stop to realize that it is the only thing in the world over which you have absolute control. Others may deprive you of your material wealth and cheat you in 1,000 ways, but no man can deprive you of the control and use of your imagination. Men may deal with you unfairly, as men often do. They may deprive you of your liberty, but they cannot take from you the privilege of using your imagination as you wish. The most inspiring poem in all literature was written by Leigh Hunt, while he was a poverty-stricken prisoner in an English prison, where he had been unjustly confined because of his advanced views on politics. This poem is entitled Abu Benadhem, and it is here reprinted as a reminder that one of the great things a man may do in his own imagination is to forgive those who have dealt unjustly with him. Abu Benadhem, may his tribe increase, awoke one night from a deep dream of peace,
and saw within the moonlight of his room, making it rich and like a lily in bloom, an angel writing in a book of gold. Exceeding peace had made Benadhem bold, and to the presence in the room he said, "What writest thou?" The vision raised its head, and, with a look made of all sweet accord, answered, "The names of those who love the Lord." "And is mine one?" said Abu. "Nay, not so," replied the angel. Abu spoke more low, but cheerily still, and said, "I pray thee, then, write me as one that loves his fellow men." The angel wrote, and vanished. The next night it came again, with a great wakening light, and showed the names whom love of God had blessed. And, lo! Benadhem's name led all the rest.
Civilization itself owes its existence to such men as Leigh Hunt, in whose fertile imaginations have been pictured the higher and nobler standards of human relationship. Abu Benadhem is a poem that will never die, thanks to this man who pictured in his imagination the hope of an ideal that is constructive. The major trouble with this world today lies in our lack of understanding of the power of imagination, for if we understood this great power, we could use it as a weapon with which to wipe out poverty and misery and injustice and persecution. And this could be done in a single generation. This is a rather broad statement, and no one understands better than the author of this course how useless such a statement would be if the principle upon which it is founded were not explained in terms of the most practical, workaday nature. Therefore, let us proceed to describe what is meant. To make this description understandable, we must accept as a reality the principle of telepathy, through the operation of which every thought we release is registering itself in the minds of other people. We need devote no time to proving that telepathy is a reality, for the reason that this lesson on imagination cannot be of the slightest value to the student who has not sufficiently informed himself to understand and accept telepathy as an established principle. We will take it for granted that you are one who accepts and understands this principle. You have often heard of mob psychology, which is nothing more nor less than some strong, dominating idea that has been created in the mind of one or more persons and registers itself in the minds of other persons through the principle of telepathy. So strong is the power of mob psychology that two men fighting in the street will often start a free-for-all fight in which bystanders will engage each other in battle without even knowing what they are fighting about or with whom they are fighting. On Armistice Day, 1918, We had evidence in abundance to prove the reality of the principle of telepathy on a scale such as the world had never before witnessed. I remember, distinctly, the impression made on my mind on that eventful day. So strong was this impression that it awakened me at about 3 o'clock in the morning, just as effectively as if someone had aroused me by physical force. As I sat up in bed, I knew that something out of the ordinary had happened, and so strange and impelling was the effect of this experience that I got up, dressed myself, and went out in the streets of Chicago, where I was met by thousands of others who had felt the touch of the same influence. Everyone was asking, "What has happened?" What had happened was this. Millions of men had received instructions to cease fighting, and their combined joy set into motion a thought wave that swept the entire world and made itself felt in every normal mind that was capable of registering this thought wave. Perhaps never in the history of the world had so many millions of people thought of the same thing, in the same manner, at the same time. For once in the history of the world, everybody felt something in common, and the effect of this harmonized thought was the worldwide mob psychology that we witnessed on Armistice Day. In connection with this statement, it will be helpful if you recall what was said about the method of creating a mastermind through the harmony of thought of two or more persons in the introductory lesson of this course. We will bring the application of this principle a little nearer home by showing how it may be made to make or break the harmonious working relationship of a business or industry. You may not have satisfied yourself that it was the harmony of thought of millions of soldiers that registered in the minds of the people of the world and caused the mob psychological condition that was everywhere in evidence on Armistice Day. But you will need no proof that a disgruntled person always disturbs everyone with whom he comes in contact. It is a well-established fact that one such person in a place of employment will disrupt the entire organization. The time is almost at hand when neither the workers nor the employers will tolerate the typical grouch inside of a place of employment, for the reason that his state of mind registers itself in the minds of those about him, resulting in distrust, suspicion, and lack of harmony. The time is near at hand when the workers in a place of employment will no more tolerate one of their own rank and file who is a typical grouch than they would a poisonous snake. Apply the principle in another way. Place among a group of workers one person whose personality is of the positive, optimistic type, and who makes it his business to sow the seeds of harmony around the place where he works. And his influence will reflect itself in every person who works with him. If every business is the extended shadow of one man, as Emerson stated, then it behooves that one man to reflect a shadow of confidence and good cheer and optimism and harmony, that these qualities may, in turn, reflect themselves in all who are connected with the business. In passing to the next step in our application of the power of imagination in the attainment of success, we will cite some of the most recent and modern examples of its use in the accumulation of material wealth and the perfection of some of the leading inventions of the world. In approaching this next step, it should be borne in mind that there is nothing new under the sun. Lift on this earth may be likened to a great kaleidoscope before which the scenes and facts and material substances are ever shifting and changing, and all any man can do is to take these facts and substances and rearrange them in new combinations. The process through which this is done is called imagination. We have stated that the imagination is both interpretative and creative in its nature. It can receive impressions or ideas, and out of these it can form new combinations. As our first illustration of the power of imagination in modern business achievement, we will take the case of Clarence Saunders, who organized the Piggly Wiggly system of self-help grocery stores. Saunders was a grocery clerk in a small southern retail store. One day he was standing in a line, with a tin tray in his hands, waiting his turn to secure food in a cafeteria. He had never earned more than $20 a week before that time, and no one had ever noticed anything about him that indicated unusual ability, but something took place in his mind as he stood in that line of waiting people. That put his imagination to work. With the aid of his imagination, he lifted that self-help idea out of the cafeteria in which he found it, not creating anything new, merely shifting an old idea into a new use, and set it down in a grocery store. In an instant, the Piggly Wiggly chain store grocery plan had been created, and Clarence Saunders, the $20-a-week grocery clerk, rapidly became the million-dollar chain store grocery man of America. Where, in that transaction, do you see the slightest indication of a performance that you could not duplicate? Analyze this transaction and measure it by the previous lessons of this course, and you will see that Clarence Saunders created a very definite purpose. He supported this purpose with sufficient self-confidence to cause him to take the initiative to transform it into reality. His imagination was the workshop in which these three factors, definite purpose, self-confidence, and initiative, were brought together and made to supply the momentum for the first step in the organization of the Piggly Wiggly plan. Thus her great ideas changed into realities. When Thomas A. Edison invented the incandescent electric light bulb, he merely brought together two old, well-known principles and associated them in a new combination. Mr. Edison and practically all others who were informed on the subject of electricity knew that a light could be produced by heating a small wire with electricity, but the difficult problem was to do this without burning the wire in two. In his experimental research, Mr. Edison tried out every conceivable sort of wire, hoping to find some substance that would withstand the tremendous heat to which it had to be subjected before a light could be produced. His invention was half completed, but it was of no practical value until he could find the missing link that would supply the other half. After thousands of tests and much combining of old ideas and his imagination, Edison finally found this missing link. In his study of physics, he had learned, as all other students of this subject learn, that there can be no combustion without the presence of oxygen. He of course knew that the difficulty with his electric light apparatus was the lack of a method through which to control the heat. When it occurred to him that there could be no combustion where there was no oxygen, he placed the little wire of his electric light apparatus inside of a glass globe, shut out all the oxygen, and lo, the mighty incandescent light was a reality. When the sun goes down tonight, you step to the wall, press a button, and bring it back again. A performance that would have mystified the people of a few generations ago, and yet there is no mystery back of your act. Thanks to the use of Edison's imagination, you have simply brought together two principles, both of which were in existence since the beginning of time. No one who knew him intimately ever accredited Andrew Carnegie with unusual ability or the power of genius, except in one respect, and that was his ability to select men who could and would cooperate in a spirit of harmony in carrying out his wishes. But what additional ability did he need in the accumulation of his millions of dollars? Any man who understands the principle of organized effort, as Carnegie understood it, and knows enough about men to be able to select just those types that are needed in the performance of a given task, could duplicate all that Carnegie accomplished. Carnegie was a man of imagination. He first created a definite purpose and then surrounded himself with men who had the training and the vision and the capacity necessary for the transformation of that purpose into reality. Carnegie did not always create his own plans for the attainment of his definite purpose. He made it his business to know what he wanted, then found the men who could create plans through which to procure it. And that was not only imagination, it was genius of the highest order. But it should be made clear that men of Mr. Carnegie's type are not the only ones who can make profitable use of imagination. This great power is as available to the beginner in business as it is to the man who has arrived. One morning, Charles M. Schwab's private car was backed on the sidetrack at his Bethlehem steel plant. As he alighted from his car, he was met by a young man stenographer who announced that he had come to make sure that any letters or telegrams Mr. Schwab might wish to write would be taken care of promptly. No one told this young man to be on hand, but he had enough imagination to see that his being there would not hurt his chances of advancement. From that day on, this young man was marked for promotion. Mr. Schwab singled him out for promotion because he had done that which any of the dozen or so other stenographers in the employ of the Bethlehem Steel Company might have done, but didn't. Today, this same man is the president of one of the largest drug concerns in the world and has all of this world's goods and wares that he wants and much more than he needs. A few years ago, I received a letter from a young man who had just finished business college and who wanted to secure employment in my office. With his letter, he sent a crisp $10 bill that had never been folded. The letter read as follows: I have just finished a commercial course in a first-class business college, and I want a position in your office because I realize how much it would be worth to a young man just starting out on his business career to have the privilege of working under the direction of a man like you. If the enclosed $10 bill is sufficient to pay for the time you would spend in giving me my first week's instructions, I want you to accept it. I will work the first month without pay, and you may set my wages after that at whatever I prove to be worth. I want this job more than I ever wanted anything in my life, and I am willing to make any reasonable sacrifice to get it. Very cordially, this young man got his chance in my office. His imagination gained for him the opportunity that he wanted, and before his first month had expired, the president of a life insurance company who heard of this incident offered the young man a private secretaryship at a substantial salary. He is today an official of one of the largest life insurance companies in the world. Some years ago, a young man wrote to Thomas A. Edison for a position. For some reason, Mr. Edison did not reply. By no means discouraged on this account, the young man made up his mind that he would not only get a reply from Mr. Edison, but what was more important still, he would actually secure the position he sought. He lived a long distance from West Orange, New Jersey, where the Edison Industries are located, and he did not have the money with which to pay his railroad fare. But he did have imagination. He went to West Orange in a freight car, got his interview, told his story in person, and got the job he sought. Today, this same man lives in Bradenton, Florida. He has retired from active business, having made all the money he needs. His name, in case you wish to confirm my statements, is Edwin C. Barnes. By using his imagination, Mr. Barnes saw the advantage of close association with a man like Thomas A. Edison. He saw that such an association would give him the opportunity to study Mr. Edison, and at the same time it would bring him in contact with Mr. Edison's friends, who were among the most influential people of the world. These are but a few cases in connection with which I have personally observed how men have climbed to high places in the world and accumulated wealth in abundance by making practical use of their imagination. Theodore Roosevelt engraved his name on the tablets of time by one single act during his tenure of office as President of the United States. And after all else that he did while in that office will have been forgotten, this one transaction will record him in history as a man of imagination. He started the steam shovels to work on the Panama Canal. Every president, from Washington on up to Roosevelt, could have started the canal and it would have been completed, but it seemed such a colossal undertaking that it required not only imagination but daring courage as well. Roosevelt had both, and the people of the United States have the canal. At the age of 40, the age at which the average man begins to think he is too old to start anything new, James J. Hill was still sitting at the telegraph key at a salary of $30 per month. He had no capital. He had no influential friends with capital, but he did have that which is more powerful than either, imagination. In his mind's eye, he saw a great railway system that would penetrate the undeveloped Northwest and unite the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. So vivid was his imagination that he made others see the advantages of such a railway system, and from there on the story is familiar enough to every schoolboy. I would emphasize the part of the story that most people never mention, that Hill's great Northern Railway system became a reality in his own imagination first. The railroad was built with steel rails and wooden cross ties, just as other railroads are built, and these things were paid for with capital that was secured in very much the same manner that capital for all railroads is secured. But if you want the real story of James J. Hill's success, you must go back to that little country railway station where he worked at $30 a month, and there pick up the little threads that he wove into a mighty railroad, with materials no more visible than the thoughts which he organized in his imagination. What a mighty power is imagination, the workshop of the soul, in which thoughts are woven into railroads and skyscrapers and mills and factories and all manner of material wealth.
I hold it true that thoughts are things. They're endowed with bodies and breath and wings, and that we send them forth to fill the world with good results or ill. That which we call our secret thought speeds forth to Earth's remotest spot, leaving its blessings or its woes, like tracks behind it as it goes. We build our future, thought by thought, for good or ill, yet know it not. Yet so the universe was wrought. Thought is another name for fate. Choose, then, thy destiny and wait. For love brings love and hate brings hate.
If your imagination is the mirror of your soul, then you have a perfect right to stand before that mirror and see yourself as you wish to be. You have the right to see reflected in that magic mirror the mansion you intend to own, the factory you intend to manage, the bank of which you intend to be president, the station in life you intend to occupy. Your imagination belongs to you. Use it. The more you use it, the more efficiently it will serve you. At the east end of the Great Brooklyn Bridge, in New York City, an old man conducts a cobbler shop. When the engineers began driving stakes and marking the foundation place for that great steel structure, this man shook his head and said, "It can't be done." Now he looks out from his dingy little sure repair shop, shakes his head, and asks himself, how did they do it? He saw the bridge grow before his very eyes, and still he lacks the imagination to analyze that which he saw. The engineer who planned the bridge saw it a reality long before a single shovel of dirt had been removed for the foundation stones. The bridge became a reality in his imagination because he had trained that imagination to weave new combinations out of old ideas. Through recent experiments in the Department of Electricity, one of our great educational institutions of America has discovered how to put flowers to sleep and wake them up again with electric sunlight. This discovery makes possible the growth of vegetables and flowers without the aid of sunshine. In a few more years, the city dweller will be raising a crop of vegetables on his back porch with the aid of a few boxes of dirt and a few electric lights, with some new vegetable maturing every month of the year. This new discovery, plus a little imagination, plus Luther Burbank's discoveries in the field of horticulture, and lo, the city dweller will not only grow vegetables all the year around, within the confines of his back porch, but he will grow bigger vegetables than any which the modern gardener grows in the open sunlight. In one of the cities on the coast of California, all of the land that was suitable for building lots had been developed and put into use. On one side of the city, there were some steep hills that could not be used for building purposes, and on the other side, the land was unsuitable for buildings because it was so low that the backwater covered it once a day. A man of imagination came to this city. Men of imagination usually have keen minds, and this man was no exception. The first day of his arrival, he saw the possibilities for making money out of real estate. He secured an option on those hills that were unsuitable for use because of their steepness. He also secured an option on the ground that was unsuitable for use because of the backwater that covered it daily. He secured these options at a very low price because the ground was supposed to be without substantial value. With the use of a few tons of explosives, he turned those steep hills into loose dirt. With the aid of a few tractors and some road scrapers, he leveled the ground down and turned it into beautiful building lots. And with the aid of a few mules and carts, he dumped the surplus dirt on the low ground and raised it above the water level, thereby turning it into beautiful building lots. He made a substantial fortune for what? For removing some dirt from where it was not needed to where it was needed. For mixing some useless dirt with imagination. The people of that little city gave this man credit for being a genius, and he was the same sort of genius that any one of them could have been had he used his imagination as this man used his. In the field of chemistry, it is possible to mix two or more chemical ingredients in such proportions that the mere act of mixing gives each of the ingredients a tremendous amount of energy that it did not possess. It is also possible to mix certain chemical ingredients in such proportions that all the ingredients of the combination take on an entirely different nature, as in the case of H20, which is a mixture of 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen, creating water. Chemistry is not the only field in which a combination of various physical materials can be so assembled that each takes on a greater value, where the result is a product entirely foreign in nature to that of its component parts. The man who blew up those useless hills of dirt and stone and removed the surplus from where it was not needed over to the lowland, where it was needed, gave that dirt and stone a value that it did not have before. A ton of pig iron is worth but little. Add to that pig iron carbon, silicon, manganese, sulfur, and phosphorus in the right proportions, and you have transformed it into steel, which is of much greater value. Add still other substances in the right proportion, including some skilled labor, and that same ton of steel is transformed into watch springs worth a small fortune. But in all these transformation processes, the one ingredient that is worth most is the one that has no material form, imagination. Here lie great piles of loose brick, lumber, nails, and glass. In its present form, it is worse than useless, for it is a nuisance and an eyesore. But mix it with the architect's imagination and add some skilled labor, and lo, it becomes a beautiful mansion worth a king's ransom. On one of the great highways between New York and Philadelphia stood an old ramshackle, time-worn barn, worth less than $50. With the aid of a little lumber and some cement, plus imagination, this old barn has been turned into a beautiful automobile supply station that earns a small fortune for the man who supplied the imagination. Across the street from my office is a little print shop that earns coffee and rolls for its owner and his helper, but no more. Less than a dozen blocks away stands one of the most modern printing plants in the world, whose owner spends most of his time traveling and has far more wealth than he will ever use. 22 years ago, those two printers were in business together. The one who owns the big print shop had the good judgment to ally himself with a man who mixed imagination with printing. This man of imagination is a writer of advertisements, and he keeps the printing plant with which he is associated supplied with more business than it can handle by analyzing its client's business, creating attractive advertising features, and supplying the necessary printed material with which to make these features of service. This plant receives top-notch prices for its printing because the imagination mixed with that printing produces a product that most printers cannot supply. In the city of Chicago, the level of a certain boulevard was raised, which spoiled a row of beautiful residences because the sidewalk was raised to the level of the second-story windows. While the property owners were bemoaning their ill fortune, a man of imagination came along, purchased the property for his song, converted the second stories into business property, and now enjoys a handsome income from his rentals. As you read these lines, please keep in mind all that was stated in the beginning of this lesson, especially the fact that the greatest and most profitable thing you can do with your imagination is the act of rearranging old ideas in new combinations. If you properly use your imagination, it will help you convert your failures and mistakes into assets of priceless value. It will lead you to discovery of a truth known only to those who use their imagination, namely, that the greatest reverses and misfortunes of life often open the door to golden opportunities.